Hey guys, my name is David Green and welcome back to episode 9 of Supernatural Archives, a show where I tell you scary stories for fun. Our last story was one about a simple yet terrifying creation of Trevor Henderson, Cartoon Cat. And this week we continue this trend by following another one of his most famous creatures, Siren Head. Now just sit back, relax, cut the lights, and lock the doors, cause it's story time. Our story begins with a hiker who loved to be out in the forest, Lucas. The only one close by was a bit of a drive, but he still enjoyed the peace and quiet he got when walking around during the weekends. Some people in his town talked about how some people went missing in the forest if they went when it was dark, so people tend to avoid it. He paid it no mind though. He coughed it up to bear attacks and continued going for his walks. However, today he was too busy in his own thoughts. He got turned around and lost. He tried retracing his footsteps but ended up in a part of the forest he had never been before. It got dark and he had to pull out his flashlight. He heard a woman's voice, seeming to be calling for help deeper in the forest. He called out but got no response. He got slightly nervous but pulled himself together as he felt his bear spray in his pocket. "You should be able to help me should I need it," he said to himself. An hour went by and Lucas started hearing strange noises. Every now and then he would hear what sounded like radio static that seemed to be close, but also distant. He swallowed his anxiety and pressed on. Suddenly he heard an air raid siren coming from what seemed to be right on top of him. He covered his ears as the sound was deafening. He stumbled around trying not to focus on it and trying not to pass out when the sound suddenly stopped. He looked around and didn't see anything out of the ordinary. That's when he took a step backwards and stepped in something. He looked down and saw a puddle of blood. He slowly turned his flashlight towards the source when the mutilated face of a bear greeted him. He flew backwards and grabbed his spade when he realized the bear hadn't moved. He was dead. He got closer and saw that the bear had been torn apart and strewn across the ground as if it had been unfolded and pulled apart by something much bigger than a bear. He started breathing heavy when he suddenly heard the sirens again. He looked all around him, trying to find the source, when he saw 2 siren horns way up amongst the trees, about 40 feet up in the air. He stood there puzzled for a minute. Why would there be sirens in the middle of a forest? That's when Lucas noticed that the sirens seemed to slowly look in his direction and start moving towards him. His instinct screamed at him to start running, and he took off in a random direction. He didn't care if it led back the way he came or not, just that he was away from the sirens. He took a glance behind him and saw his chaser, a 40-foot-tall abomination with abnormally long legs and arms, rotting flesh, and a siren pole and sirens in place of its head. The sirens changed to the voice of a woman screaming in agony as the sound of flesh being ripped apart was also heard. It was here that Lucas realized what the creature was doing. It was able to replay people's final moments from those sirens, either by using them to psychologically torture his prey or to trick people into becoming his next victims. As he ran, Siren Head got closer with each thunderous step, the sound of the woman screaming still playing amongst others. Lucas tried to outrun the creature, but trying to outrun a 40-foot-tall monster is easier said than done. He managed to find a hollowed-out tree and scrambled to hide in it. He breathed heavily but silently as to not draw attention to himself. The footsteps grew louder until he saw a monstrous foot crash just a few feet from him. Siren Head groaned as he looked around trying to find him. He started playing a wailing sound, similar to that of a whale mixed with radio static. Siren Head eventually started walking away and his footsteps grew distant. Lucas waited a long time before gathering the courage to crawl out from the tree and look around. He didn't see any signs that the creature was still close by and breathed a sigh of relief. He could still hear the siren sounds, but they were so far away he didn't really mind. But it was odd. He also seemed really close. He turned around and was met with what looked like a fleshy tree. He looked closer at it, trying to figure out what it was, when he saw something shift out of the corner of his eye. He pointed his flashlight at it and saw another fleshy tree. His heart stopped. He slowly raised his flashlight upwards as he saw monstrous hands, an enormous torso, and finally, the sirens. He barely realized his mistake when Siren Head grabbed him and raised him up towards his head. Lucas struggled against the grip but prepared for the inevitable. In a last-ditch effort, he pointed his light at the sirens, hoping to blind the creature. Siren Head was unfazed. He had no eyes to blind. In absolute horror, Lucas watched as the siren slowly turned in his direction, revealing a horrifying set of mouths inside of the sirens with rows of human-like teeth. The sirens started speaking with the voice of that woman again. Then they screamed and lunged at Lucas. Since no one ever goes into that forest that often, no one noticed that Lucas went missing. The only trace he left behind was his car still sitting at the entrance of the trails. And that's it for today. Siren Head has always been an interesting character to read about online, so I thought I'd take a crack at it. If you guys have a suggestion for our next video, please leave a suggestion down in the comments and we'll see what we can do. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.